Welcome back to another episode of Spinnaker Tough Talks. I'm your host, Sheifalika Bhatnagar, and today I'm joined by Mccloud, the Black Student Union president at the University of North Florida. Welcome, Neek. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here today. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Happy to have this conversation. First of all, let's touch base with the Black Student Union this year and see what some upcoming events are.
With the Black Student Union, much like every other organization on campus, we are virtual this semester, but we are still working very hard to bring some fun and informative programming to you all. We do have Taco Tuesday with BSU that was uploaded first on the 15th, and the next one will be uploaded on the 29th of September. And then we also have a joint event with LASO, which is the Latin American Student Organization. And that event is called Embracing Your Afro-Latinidad. And that event will be on this coming Tuesday on September 22nd. And then department-wide, we have various events and even trainings that will be, I feel like will be very beneficial, and especially in regards to the push for diversity and inclusion. We have a race and ethnicity training that will be offered through the Cultural Competency Pursuit Training Initiative, and that will be held on November 5th, a Thursday, from 10 a.m. to noon, which all faculty and staff are welcome to register for that event.
Wow, that all sounds really fantastic. It's a great thing to see two different groups that represent different heritage come together. You know, like you said, you guys, BSU and LASO are combining efforts. And also it's really interesting that last event you talked about being ethnic heritage, like being connected to it and having that open to staff as well as faculty. What are some of the aspirations you have for that type of event?
For that type of event, we actually aren't hosting that. It's going to be our specific department, which is the Department of Diversity Initiatives. So that will be hosted by some of our faculty and staff within the department. And it's essentially there to give more insight into the topics at hand. So for instance, there's one on September 23rd from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Focused on worldview and religion, and some of our faculty and staff that specialize in religion and worldviews will be facilitating that presentation. And like the one I mentioned before, will be focused on race and ethnicity. And there's a wide range of offerings that will be happening, that will be taking place from September all the way through November. We have a few in October that focus on safe spaces, specializing in LGBTQ community, gender inclusion, and disabilities, just to become more cognizant of those specific factors and to become more culturally enhanced and aware of the things that those specific topics relate to.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Let's talk a little bit about race and ethnicity and maybe the difference between and the importance of each one. What are your thoughts?
For race, I feel like it's definitely something that, you know, is a hot topic right now, because race is essentially what we're classified as far as like most times our skin color. So I would be considered to be Black, but I feel like ethnicity is more so of what our heritage and our culture is comprised of. Our ethnicity is like what we have ingrained in us, the fabric of our lives, right? Ethnicity is more so of the culture and the heritage that we have taken form of from our upbringing and how we were raised. So my race would be Black, or I guess African American, and then my outside of that, I do have different bloodlines that run through me. Like my grandmother is Cuban, but overall, all in all, I definitely stick to and cling to my Blackness. So that's what I like to go by the most.
I see. I think that it's important for us to have conversations about Blackness, and especially in today's climate. We've gone through so much this year as far as seeing people of color rise up and stand up together and protest for one another's equality and rights. And I want to touch base a little bit about your opinions on the Black Lives Matter movement and how you've seen it evolve over the year.
I think it's definitely evolved in all of the right ways. I feel like with everything, it's left to interpretation. Some people have their own ideals of what the Black Lives Matter movement is, but to me, I feel like it's exactly what it says. I feel like it's a movement to push the fact that Black lives do matter and that we aren't disposable and that we belong in every place and every space, as our, other counterparts do. Regardless of how we look on the outside, we're still the same on the inside. And I think that movement is just trying to push the fact that we do deserve the same rights and equality as everyone else. It's not saying, to me, it's not saying that Black lives matter more than any other demographic or racial group. It's just saying that we do matter and that we should have the same equal rights and opportunities. And even, when I say opportunities, that's even the opportunity to live and survive when we get stopped by the police, or, if we have a run-in with someone who may not be fond of us just simply for the color of our skin. That movement, like I said, it has progressed so much, but with every movement, there is opposition, and there are people who may not understand it and may try to come against it. But for my personal opinion on the movement, I think it's something very beautiful, and I feel like it's very necessary in order for us to really create the change and create the movement of change that we really need to see in these aspects, because it's been a long time coming. It's something that we've been fighting for a very long time, and I feel like, time is up, and I feel like the Black Lives Matter movement, for the people who actually are pushing the Black Lives Matter movement for all the positive reasons, I feel like are doing very great work and are leading us into the right direction.
I have to say, it's been an incredible thing to watch and see evolve throughout this year. I think one thing I'm noticing that's new is there are a lot of young leaders coming into the fray, a lot of young activists organizing, and many of them from the Black community, some of them are not, and there's allyship happening as well. There has been a little bit of pushback as far as from the All Lives Matter side of the protests to the Blue Lives Matter side. And then recently, in the last few months, there has been a progression from protest to riot. And riots are beginning to kind of spur up in several cities across the country. So as a girl from Memphis, Tennessee, who grew up understanding and researching the civil rights movement, I look to the younger generation now, and I'm wondering, number one, how are we learning from the civil rights movement to apply to today's Black Lives Matter movement? And number two, how are we policing ourselves so that we can stay a peaceful protest as opposed to a violent riot that damages property or hurts people? So number one, how are we learning from our older generations? Number two, how can we keep it peaceful?
To that, I will definitely have to go back to one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr., and that is that the riot is the language of the unheard. So I feel like with riots, they generally start as peaceful protests. I've never seen any riot that started just simply as a riot. It came from issues of, that we are essentially over it, to say the least. A lot of the riots that I've seen have stemmed from unarmed Black people being killed and justice not being served. That's where I've seen riots stem from. And I've seen riots stem from peaceful protests being turned into riots simply because of, police interaction. So to the riots, I definitely say that, in echoing Martin Luther King Jr., that it is a language of the unheard, and how people choose to express their disappointment and in the system, I feel like is truly up to them. Now, is it my ministry? No, but I will not look down on anyone who decides to demonstrate themselves in that way. But in reference to like applying the actions of our civil rights leaders from the past into our leadership and civil rights today, I definitely feel like they set the tone for us. As far as like the late Senator John Lewis, I feel like he definitely set the standard of good trouble. And with that, leading into your second question, I definitely feel like as far as peaceful protests, I feel like if we go into it with the right intentions and with the mindset that we aren't here to start trouble, we aren't here to make a mess of our cities and our towns. We're here to let our voices be heard and to hopefully enact change. And in the peaceful way that most times they went in those times, I definitely feel like they set the example for us. And a lot of the aggression and the anger and the riots that we are seeing are stemming from the fact that those civil rights leaders all the way back in the early 1950s and 60s, they started this race. And now here we are all of these years later, still trying to finish the same race that they started. So I feel like a lot of the aggression and anger that stem from the riots is honestly from the fact that we're still fighting for the same thing that they started so many years ago. And the fact that we're still fighting for the same thing, something as simple as equality and justice for us, not just for our white, for the white people, it also should be extended to people of color, to Black people, to brown people. And we should be receiving the same justices and privileges that they have as well.
I think that was very well said. And as you mentioned, it is something that we do have to continue fighting for, and it has been a very long fight so far. And I appreciate you mentioning that as far as your ministry goes for your student organization, that you don't condone the violence at all. And also it's still a matter of it's a difficult issue, and it's still a matter that brings a lot of anger and grief to the surface for many people in the community. When you speak to your Black Student Union members, what are some of the messages that you're hearing from them, some of the needs and hopes that they have?
As far as campus-wide, I feel like everyone, the collective ideals that I've received is that the fact that we want more representation. We want to see more people who look like us in our classrooms leading us. We want to see more opportunities and more resources for us. We want more visibility on campus. I do think that, UNF as a whole has been doing a great job of including the diversity and inclusion aspect with the different roles that are being enacted and different programs and trainings that are being enacted. But I do feel like it's still a long way to go. I do appreciate the efforts, but I feel like as a collective, everyone just wants to see more representation, and not just for an initiative just to show that, oh, we're doing it now, but something that's longstanding that will be ingrained into the policies and legislature of the university to not just happen for this year while it's hot, but to be something that is, that is ingrained into, like I said, the legislation and the different things of the campus forever. Because the struggles that we are facing aren't just right now, and it didn't just start. We see a lot of the diversity initiatives and things like that are happening now. For the sake of business, for the sake of saving face, for the sake of, on a business level, for the sake of saving your pockets, right? But I think the biggest takeaway from everything is to make sure that it's something that isn't just being done for show, something that it needs to be something that is, not only sincere, but intentional for all of the right reasons. Not just because you want a headline in a newspaper, but, more so of something that you're actually doing that's intentional to have, to have people of color in the room when these rules and regulations are being enacted, when these new legislations and things of that nature are being enacted, to have people of color in the room. Because if you're going to enact things that are supposed to benefit us, it's only right that we're in the room. So the collective, like I said, the collective issues that I've gathered is the fact that, we want to see more of us, not only on campus as students, but we want to see more of us in the classrooms and, in the different administrative offices and things of that nature as well. And we also want our voices to be heard. The Students for Democratic Society, they actually are very vocal in what they want to see from the campus when it comes to students of color. They are very vocal about it. So I think they are a very great reference when it comes to what students of color on campus want to, see and what we want to happen as well.
I see. Wow. I think you're right. Representation not only in the classroom, but leading the classrooms, teaching the classrooms, and in the offices and in the legislation that of not just the student body, but the university itself, applying principles that allow representation and your voices to be heard. That is an ongoing situation. I'm glad at least to some degree UNF has done a good job in your opinion. So when it comes to bridging the gap between the University Police Department and the University Black Student Union, have you guys ever done like vigils together or have sit down conversations to open up dialogue between you guys and the local university police?
To my knowledge, especially since I'm fairly new, I don't have any knowledge of any type of relationship between UPD and the BSU, but it's something I'm definitely open to because I feel like in order for us to have that trust in the policing system, whether that be university-wide or pretty much period throughout the country, especially with everything that we see in the news today with how the relationship between police and the Black community already looks, just based on everything that we're seeing. That's something that I would be open to. I can't speak for my organization as a whole, but that's definitely something that I would be open to just to try to instill that trust. But I feel like it's a two-way street. And in order for us to have that trust, it's definitely some lines of communication and a relationship needs to be built. So as far as I know, we don't have a relationship at the time, but I honestly feel like that is something that I would be open to and to sharing with my members to see if that's something that they're comfortable with to help build that trust in our policing system on campus.
Yes, I think, I believe in years past, there has been a couple of sit-down conversations in which the UPD did show up and the students were the ones talking. There was a panel discussion and the UPD just sat and listened and the entire crew came out, the entire department. And I think that speaking to Chief Mackesy, the police chief of UPD, he mentioned that that was an event that happened a year or two ago and it was something that profoundly moved him and he was very proud to be a part of it. So I think recultivating and staying on top of that type of relationship is beneficial for both sides of the issue. I think it's reductive in many ways to take something like the Black Lives Matter movement and then distract it with all lives or blue lives or any purple lives, whatever. It doesn't, I think it misses the point of the original point of the movement. And like you said before, the name of the movement itself says what it means what it says.
Right. And into the All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, for that, like you said, it's deflective. Like we're deflecting away from the actual matter at hand, which is the fact that Black Lives Matter. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, when we say Black Lives Matter, it isn't saying that all lives don't matter or blue lives don't matter, because the thing about blue lives is you could take off that uniform and you won't be blue. You'll just be a person. So that's not really a valid argument for me. And when it comes to all lives matter, in order for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter. So for someone to counter the phrase Black Lives Matter with all lives matter is very counterproductive and it isn't factual, because if we're saying Black Lives Matter and you're saying all lives matter, it's defeating the purpose, because if you aren't really engaging with the fact that, we feel like our lives don't matter because we're being killed every day, seems like by the police and by, when we're unarmed, I feel like you said, it's very deflective from the point at the matter at hand, which is the fact that we want to show and we're screaming from the rooftops that we just want to live. We want to live and we deserve to live and we deserve the rights and the liberties of everyone else in the country.
I think you're absolutely right. There's that wonderful young 12-year-old from Jacksonville, actually, who came up with that song, We Just Want to Live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to how powerfully and passionate the young people are about this issue. They're, like you said earlier, time is up. And I wonder, let's talk a little bit about what young Black Americans go through and what it feels like, so that people who are listening that may not fully understand or comprehend what the day-to-day experience is like, that they can maybe gain an insight from you, in your own words, about your own life.
To me, from my perspective, it's actually kind of funny because I was having a conversation with one of my childhood friends who actually lives in Seattle now, which is totally across the country. And you would think that it's a bit of a difference, but I was having a conversation with her, and she was talking about how she was on her way back from an appointment, and it took her down these back roads that she didn't know. And that's what made me think of, like, sometimes when I travel back home to where I'm from Tampa, in order to avoid the traffic on I-4, it takes me through like some old, country towns. And the first thing that came to both of our minds is, I wouldn't want to break down in any of these towns because I'm unfamiliar. And I see a lot of, propaganda that makes me believe that if I break down somewhere that I won't make it home. And that's just one of the realities that we have to think of every day when we get stopped by the police. If we break down in a town that we're unfamiliar with, if we walk into a store and we have a big purse, or we have on a hoodie, we have to worry about what the outcome could be. And for a lot of people, that isn't a reality, but unfortunately for us, it is. Even with her being all the way on the West Coast, where it isn't really, the South is mostly known for like the racial discrimination, but it's everywhere. So the fact that she carries that with her, even on the West Coast, and it's something that we have to face a lot, in my experience in the South, is definitely a different experience. Especially like when we get stopped by the police, is like, we know that, like, judging from the cases of Sandra Bland or Philando Castile, it could simply be a traffic stop that, ends our life. And even, down to the simplest things of, like I said, walking into a grocery store or supermarket and being profiled and expected to be this person that we may not be. That's something that we have to constantly think of. Every move that we make, we have to constantly have over our heads that we have to try to do what's right in order to save our own lives. Even I'll take it down as much as like the classroom. With UNF being a predominantly white institution, a lot of times I know from my perspective as a student, if I'm in a classroom where, it's mostly, white students, I do feel like I have to, as much as I want to be myself, I feel like there is a certain amount of reservation that I have in order to not look like the outspoken Black girl, or if I'm upset about something, or if a question doesn't sound right to me. Sometimes, I may be reluctant to ask the question again or ask the professor to repeat it, because I feel like people will be looking at me, sideways. And now while I haven't had any negative experiences like that, that's still something that's in the back of my mind. Thankfully, since I've been at UNF since fall of 2018, I haven't had any racial discrimination issues or any type of uncomfortability when it came to that. Thankfully, everyone that I've encountered has been nothing but open and nice and kind to me. But I do know there are some students who have had their own, experiences. And like, to just sum it all up, that those are a few of the things that we do have to face every single day. Try not to be me as a Black woman in leadership, me trying not to be the angry Black woman, or like to feed into the stereotypes that I know that a lot of people already have generalized about me and all of the other students who look like us. So yeah, we just honestly, outside of school, outside of UNF, there are many things that we have to think of and be cognizant of at all times, in order to try to save our lives and to remain safe.
And that seems to be I think the crux of the entire issue, is that it is, it's a shame that you can't feel that you can just be whoever you are, and instead of feeding into any societal stereotypes that people have. whether you're a woman or a man or gender nonconforming in the Black community, it's still unjust and unfair to be put under this type of restriction where you can't even be yourself. And so my next question is, does that build a sense of resiliency, or is something like self-love a way for you to heal that burden of restraint? How do you break those shackles for yourself in your own world so you can be truly who you are?
To that, I honestly, a lot of times I just think of our previous civil rights leaders. When I think of Martin Luther King Jr., when I think of Rosa Parks, when I think of Senator John Lewis, like I think of power, and I think of all of the things that they were able to prevail through, and all of the battles that they had to fight when it came down to racial issues, and they handled it with grace, to say the least. And I try to think of them and how powerful like the movements that they started are, and now I'm a part of that. So when I think of them, I think of my strength. When I think of my ancestors that fought so hard for me to even be here, that's what helps to build my strength. And honestly, in the past, as much as I've been in tune with my Blackness and my heritage and my culture, the past year alone, I've learned so much more that makes me so much prouder to be who I am. So in situations like that, I just think of the fact that I'm Black, I'm beautiful, and I belong. I should be able and like willing to be who I am in any space, because that's who I am. So just as much as they have the space in the room to be who they want to be, I shouldn't have any problems, expressing myself the way that I am, because who I am and what I am, I'm beautiful, and everything about me is beautiful. So with that motivation inside of me from our ancestors and from our previous leaders, it just really helps me to feel more powerful in who I am and what I can do.
I think that was beautifully said. And I think that speaks to the strength of character it takes in many ways. I'm noticing also in the last couple of years, there's been some powerful females in the media industry, in news and movie and TV, and all kinds of new voices are coming to light. We've got Ava DuVernay, we've got Issa Rae, we've got a bunch of people putting out shows that kind of speak to the experience. Have you found anything like that relatable? And do you think that's actually maybe a good way to show the rest of the world what the internal experiences is without having to be interviewed like I'm doing to you?
Well, first of all, I'll say I actually don't mind this at all. I feel like the more perspective that, people outside of our experience has in order to understand what we go through, I feel like is beneficial overall. But to those shows, Insecure is honestly one of the most relatable shows that I've ever watched, which is by Issa Rae. It's something that I feel like definitely relays a lot of the experiences on I'll definitely say on a more like hilarious level, like more on the surface level, and it's definitely more relatable, and it is nice to turn on the television and see something that I can relate to see characters in a cast that looks like me. And to Ava DuVernay, she definitely goes a lot deeper into the racial issues and the injustices that we face as Black people. And I definitely appreciate her for all of her film work that she does, because like I said, she digs a lot deeper into the topics that even as Black people, sometimes we don't want to see. I still haven't brought myself to watch When They See Us, because I watched the first 5 minutes and I just started crying and couldn't do it. Because a lot of the times it can be, it can be hurtful to see that, this movie is, while it was made a few years ago, it's based so many years ago, and, it's still happening today. So, sometimes it can be kind of, I'm trying to look for the word, but it could be kind of like not depressing in almost a sense, like to know that we're still going through, but at the same time, it's empowering, because like, look at what we've came through, look at what we've overcome, and we're still standing today to still fight to see another day, to keep fighting for these same things. But overall, between Blackish, Grownish, all of the films and shows that Kenya Barris is producing, I'm in love with all of the Black cast, all of the Black directors. That's really, because in order to really tell our story, we have to tell it. And I found that, you know, a lot of times Black stories have been told by white people. And while if they have the perspective, that's fine. But we want to see productions that include us, that are about us, made by us, because I feel like that's when who we are can truly be reflected and portrayed in those films and in those shows. So I'm happy about it. Just thinking about it makes me happy. It makes me want to watch, you know, some Insecure, rewatch all the seasons, because I feel like it's relatable, and it's finally a time where I can see myself in so many characters. Even going back to Black Panther, that was the one of the first times in my lifetime that I've seen so many of us in a movie theater, showing up with our dashikis on, and, you know, just ready to celebrate our culture, and finally feeling like, you know, something is for us. While we do love, you know, different movies and genres, but that's all we have ever known. So now with this new outbreak of like Black films and productions, it's just very empowering. And I'm really elated at the fact that our time is finally here. And we're not only being able to produce and film and bring out all of these things, but at the same time, we're getting our accolades for it. There's so many Grammys and Emmys that Black producers and actors and performers are being, you know, awarded, that they finally deserve, because it's finally time. So yes, I love it. I love the whole movement, and I'm so excited to see so much more that, you know, will come of this movement.
I think I think it is a very exciting time, and I think that there has been in it like a tipping point a little bit. I think we need to push more, but we have a lot of powerful storytellers out there, and not a lot of great talent. You know, recently Chadwick Boseman just passed away, but in his 4 years while he was sick and struggling to, you know, get through that, he put out 10 different films that touched genres and bases that were just profoundly important, from music to sports to superheroes, you know, and his most recent film, The Five Bloods, directed by Spike Lee. An all Black cast that definitely brought a level of gravitas to the Vietnam War and then to today, and how far we've evolved from that point. It had a really great perspective, and Chadwick Boseman himself did a wonderful job in that. When we have the opportunity to see ourselves reflected back to us, I believe it instills a greater sense of self and community. I'm so happy that it's actually inspiring. I find all these films and things fascinating as well as a storyteller. Do you have any areas that you would like to see explored as well? Are there certain things that there's somewhere else we can go in the future?
I would like to see a lot more outside of slave movies, and, you know,
Right.
I would like to see much more of the positive aspects of Black history, more films of more biopics of, you know, specific civil rights leaders or Black leaders over time. Just dig deeper into their lifetimes and dig deeper into like the actual obstacles that they face, aside from the major events that we may know of, to kind of tell the story of what led to, you know, the greatness that they achieved in their lifetimes. I love like the musical aspects, like telling of like Motown and like learning the basics of like music, because I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day, and, you know, just talking about like rock and roll. Like everyone thinks that Elvis Presley is like the king of rock and roll, but it's like, no, he's not.
No.
You know, like, so it's
Most
just.
Def has a line about that. Chuck Berry is rock and roll, not Elvis Presley.
Thank you. But even like going back to, you know, Chadwick Boseman, I think it just definitely speaks to the volumes of like the strength that we have, and the strength that, you know, Black people have exhibited over time. He was battling a crippling disease for a very long time, and in that time, like you said, filmed so many films, and I really I admire his strength, and I also admire his dignity, because during that time, he was also offered roles that presented, Black people in a negative light. I think one movie he was supposed to play like a gangster, and he turned it down because he didn't want to be the one to reflect the Black community in that time. He only played roles that really truly exhibited the beauty that, Black people can exude. And I definitely appreciate him for that. And again, back to his strength. No one that he was around, even on those days of long filming, no one knew what he was going through. And I think that also speaks volumes to, at least in my experience as a Black woman, like what we can be facing and still, feel the need to come to work with a smile, to, show up to class and still get our work done, to where no one will ever know what we're going through, because we're so used to concealing those things and, portraying that happy person, or that, the person who always gets it done regardless of the fact, because of the strength that we have. So I truly admire him for all of the work that he did. It was a big loss for the Black community, and I mean the world as a whole, for all of the great work that he put into the world before he unfortunately passed away.
I am grateful, though, that he was able to pass away with his family. And you're right, he did turn many roles down that just didn't portray Black people in an actual honest to goodness new way. And so he will be missed by all. So moving into a different arena of conversation, I've been recently seeing a lot of people on social media who are people of color trying to say this one point, that for all the people out there of different races or other races than Black that are worried about this big backlash, or there's going to come a day where all that vengeance that has been accrued for all the bad karma and all the terrible things done to Black people, there's going to come a day where there's going to be just this sweeping rage and violence and war, and it's going to come right to your front door. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people speak up and say, it hasn't happened yet, because it's not going to happen that way. We're out here doing what we need to do, and you don't have to fear that anymore. So let's talk a little bit about that fear. I think that stems from a certain level of guilt and shame from other races. But from a Black perspective, how do you feel about that?
As you mentioned, I think it definitely speaks to the fear that they may have, and of course the guilt. I honestly feel like if that was something that would have happened, it would have definitely happened when we were physically in shackles. It would have happened then. I feel like at this point, it's hard for them to understand that all we want is equality. All we want is the same opportunities that you all have. I definitely feel like it's from a point of some soul searching that they may need to do in order to really confront the demons that they don't want to face, because we aren't the problem. And I feel like it's easy to show and to visualize us as the problem, and to formulate these ideas in your mind that will help to perpetuate your negative thinking, instead of confronting the actual issues that you have with us. And that's the fact that, there was a time where we were in shackles, where we were, slaves, and to be in the position of power at that time and to want to cling to that power, I would be scared too. But coming from a Black perspective, as a Black woman, that isn't the goal. Me personally, that's too much energy for me. And I have too many, especially at this point in my life, I have so many great connections and relationships with people who are white, and that's not what I want. The most that I want the justice, and I want the equal rights and opportunities as they have. That is what I want. And I think that speaks to, at least from my perspective, that speaks to the Black community as a whole. If that was something that we wanted, it would have been happened. I feel like with us doing the protesting and really getting out into the streets and on social media, really trying to push the agendas that we are, taking over and burning everything down isn't a part of that plan. The plan is the same plan that, we started with once we were freed, and once the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Like what, all of the visions that our previous leaders had. We want, we want we want to be able to walk outside and not be worried about losing our lives. All we want is to be able to apply for a job and know that we're getting the same pay that one of our colleagues will get if they are white. We want to know that when we walk into anywhere that we'll be treated just as fairly as everyone else. We want to know that we have the same liberties and opportunities as everyone else that aren't Black or brown, and that's just coming from me, from my perspective. I can't truly speak for everyone in the Black community, but that's just my perspective on everything. If it was something that we wanted, it would have already happened.
I see. I agree. And you spoke a lot about justice and change. Let's talk about, there's someone I want to talk about, and her name is Brianna Taylor. And I recently, this week, I found out from the city of Louisville that her family received a settlement, financial settlement, that the city area is enacting a new law to try and protect against this type of home invasion and mistaken murder, essentially. However, only one of the officers involved in that has been fired, and none of them have been arrested. And since the unfortunate killing of Brianna Taylor in her bed at night, which was a terrible nightmare, since that time, people have been saying, arrest the people who killed her. And at this point, I believe the settlement is done. There are some new legislations enacting. There are also new police initiatives in that area saying that policing that community need to live in the community too. You can't just live in the suburbs and go police some other area that's not your home. There are other things as well, as far as like Section 8 housing and whatnot, like how to provide better housing and give police incentives to live there. However, only one of the officers involved has been fired because he fired several rounds, I believe 10, into the house before entering the house. So what do you think about the legal resolution so far of the Brianna Taylor case?
I think it's not enough, and it'll never be enough. I believe the settlement amount was at $12 million, and no dollar amount will ever bring her back. The only thing that I feel like would truly give her the justice that she deserves, because she's been on magazine covers, she's been on billboards, she's has all these new laws, she's sparked all this new legislature and different laws, and it's not enough. I feel like the true justice will come from all of the officers not only being fired, but being arrested, because the act that was committed was truly barbaric. And I feel like they went there with a motive. They had a plan and they enacted on that plan. And unfortunately, that plan ended with, Brianna Taylor's life being taken. She's literally been given everything else. She's been on Oprah magazine, like I said, Billboard. She has all these things, but I feel like the true price that needs to be paid for her death will be the arrest and conviction. Let me be clear on that, because they can be arrested all day, but we've seen how an arrest can turn into the case being overturned or being acquitted. And what I truly want, and what I truly believe the Black community needs to see, even her family honestly needs to see, is arrests and convictions of all three that took part in that, because I feel like it was truly an act of negligence, because from the research that I've done, that wasn't the first time that has happened in Louisville with those specific officers. And yeah, I just feel like no amount of money, I don't care if they scraped up all the money in the world, because honestly, to that point, that $12 million isn't coming from the police department, because the police department is funded by tax dollars that come from the public. So a $12 million settlement to her family, while it sounds good for them, that's the price that the public is having to pay. The police officers aren't paying that price. That $12 million isn't coming out of their pension or their salaries. It's coming out of the public's pockets. So in order for them to truly pay for the crime that they committed, for me, that crime will be paid for with their convictions.
I think that some people are wondering, why isn't that enough? She's got a law, she's got all this notoriety, she's got all this awareness, and Louisville is trying to change certain things. But when it comes down to it, if you go into someone's house, mistake their identity, kill them in their sleep, whether you have a badge or not, what does that make you? And I wonder what is it about the conviction and putting those people who unjustly or mistakenly murdered her, what is it about that conviction that the Black community needs to see? Is there some type of healing or retribution, or where does that come from?
I think it comes from the desire of justice. We've seen, and I think the fact that we've honestly seen too many times, like in the case of Trayvon Martin, he was essentially killed in cold blood. He was hunted and killed in cold blood, and George Zimmerman was arrested and he got off. And that was literally a slap in the face to the Black community. It was honestly traumatizing for me. I still remember exactly where I was, exactly what I was doing when I heard the verdict. So I feel like at this point, like I've been saying this entire hour, that justice, in order for justice to truly be served, we need the same justice that, say, a white woman, if that happened to a white woman, we all know how it would have ended. They would have been arrested on the spot and a conviction would have probably happened by now. But I think the hunger for convictions for those officers in this situation, especially for, she was innocent. She was literally sleeping in her bed. She wasn't up. She didn't have a gun in her hand. She wasn't provoking them. She wasn't resisting. She was literally sleeping in her bed. And the manhunt feeling of it all is really just, I feel like for me especially, is what pushes me to want convictions, because at the end of the day, we all know what the reality would be if those cops were Black. We know what the reality would be if the victim was white. We know what the reality would be. We know there would be convictions. So yeah, I think the hunger for those convictions will essentially just be justice, something that we only see few and far between when it comes to the Black community. We want the same justice that would happen if the tables were turned.
So I think when it did happen, people realized that the police weren't really looking for her. They were looking for someone else that had been tied to her and her life, because she was just a student, and she was, I believe, a nursing student, and she wasn't guilty of the crimes that they had. For all that firepower that they brought, she wasn't the one they were looking for. I think you're right. There is a level of justice that needs to be said. When it happened, and when I heard about it the first time, I realized, oh my gosh, how terrifying would it be to have the police come into my house and think I'm somebody I'm not, and just shoot me before even looking at my face to see if I'm a man or a woman, because they were not looking for a woman. They were looking for a man. I wonder, I don't think that's how other people in the community and in the society saw it. I think they saw it as, oh, this is going to blow up and be another Black Lives issue matter, and this is going to be another talking point. And, this year has already been difficult enough with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd. We've gone through so many. Every year there's a stack of names. And from a person of color, but from a person outside of the Black community, outside of the white community, I don't look at it as a race thing. I look at it as like, what if a SWAT team got my house, got the wrong house number? That's an injustice in and of itself. And That's a huge negligence. But for the Black community, it deeply resonates, so much so that it's like we're running out. I feel, this is what I've heard and this is what I feel, that it can be disheartening at times to look at the circumstances in which these deaths occur and see, I can't wear a hoodie, I can't walk down the street, I can't go running in my own neighborhood, I can't go bird watching in Central Park, I can't sleep in my bed at home at night. Like, I feel like I think that is one of the greatest struggles that I see people go through. At least from myself and my viewers, I hope that we can really take some time to think about how many tiny privileges we may have in our own life that we take for granted. And when the circumstances of these deaths occur, to reflect upon yourself, what if that was me? How would I get through this? How would I go on with my day? Do you have any advice for anybody else who's wanting to connect to that?
To me personally, first, like in the case of Breonna Taylor, when I see Breonna Taylor, I see myself. I feel like we look alike. You know, we're Black women. You know, we have the same face. We have the big lips, big, like we look alike. So every day, that's definitely something that I think of. Like, if it's not me, like that could have been me. You know, if it happened to her, that could be me. And I feel like for people outside of our community that, you know, may seek to understand how we feel about situations like this, I just say, talk to your friends, talk to your Black friends, ask them about their experiences, because the best experience and the best insight that you will have is from people who are actually experiencing it. Don't look to music videos or, you know, these things that normally portray us in negative lights. But I just encourage you to do some research on civil rights in African American history, do some research on the Black experience to like truly understand where we're coming from, why we say the things we say, why we say Black Lives Matter, why we protest, why we do everything we do every day to try to, like I said, push the fact that we matter and we belong here just as much as anyone else. And it isn't as simple as, you know, if you aren't happy here, go back to your country, because this is our country. This is our country too. Our ancestors gave us the right to be here. They worked for our right to be here. And we belong here just as much as anyone else. So I would definitely encourage anyone who may be an ally or who may not be an ally, who may not believe, you know, the latter, may not believe that we belong or may not believe that Black Lives Matter. I just encourage you to do some soul searching and to truly seek deep down inside what the issue is, because it couldn't be with people who you haven't had an interaction with. It couldn't be with people who don't look like you simply because of the skin color that we have, because we're all the same on the inside. I just encourage you to do some soul searching and truly get to the root of where your issue lies, and to try to have an open mind and you believe in God, to seek God, because we're all God's people, and at the end of the day, we're all have the same ending. So I just hope that, you know, for anyone who may be an ally or who may not be an ally, that you seek the information and you find the information that you need to truly make a change in your mind and your heart, and to truly understand the struggles and the issues that we face every day.
I think that was very well said. And thank you for coming on Tough Talks today to speak with me. Well, guys, that's another episode of Spinnaker Tough Talks. I'm your host, Sheifalika Bhatnagar, and thank you again to Nick Mccloud, president of the Black Student Union at the University of North Florida. Check us out for our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.